So we're on Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph. By Tnan, where is it? Tnan Hasa. We had seen before Kagoinda Tri Charaba. The Gemara just said there are certain halachas that it's very important to say the explanation for them because otherwise people won't know what the explanation is. They won't guess what it is. So therefore, it's important to tell people this halacha. So this is another example of that kind of situation. Tnan Hasan, about 20 lines down on Kumfa Aleph Amara. Someone who does a rhesus arrangement. We're on Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph, right in the middle. Someone who enters into a sharecropping agreement with his from a guy, and a makabel is an irregular rhesus where it's where the sharecropper agrees to pay a percentage of the crop to the owner of the field. And he did this from a guy. A guy was in possession of stei avoisa. So what does he do? This yid who has to pay the sharecropper's percentage to the guy, ma'aser v'noisenloi. I'm sorry? We're on Kuf Aleph Amid Aleph in the middle. So the yid has to first take out the meiser.
Who's the avoisa was it? The nachrit's the avoisa?
I'm leaving that aside for now.
Oh, okay.
Gemara is going to define what stei avoisa is, but it means this is a yid who's doing a sharecropper agreement with a guy. So the yid has to first take off the full amount of meiser on the entire amount. Let's say he agreed to give 50% of the proceeds of the field to the guy. He has to take off the full amount of meiser from the entire amount, and then afterwards he takes out the guy's percentage. So let's say he takes off 20% in total of meiser. He's only going to end up with 30% himself because he has to give 50% to the guy, plus he has to take off meiser. What's this case? What does the sada avoisa mean? Eretz Yisrael. It refers to the Eretz Yisrael. Stei avoisa. But my call is stei avoisa. Sada Avram Yitzchak Yaakov. So stei avoisa is just a way of saying if a guy came into possession of land in Eretz Yisrael and a yid is working as a sharecropper on the land, the stei Eretz Yisrael, and he's paying to the guy, he has to separate Shumas and Maisus before he gives the guy his percentage as a sharecropper. And what's the explanation for that? Because a guy, even though he's the titular owner of this piece of land, but legabe dinim of meiser, he's not considered to own. He can't have a kinyan in Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't really belong to him. It belongs to a yid, and therefore the whole thing, there is a chiyuv of meiser on it. And legabe this din of separating meiser, we're going to treat this makabel, this person who has to pay a percentage, as if he's paying to the guy a fixed fee. Now it's clear that someone who is a sharecropper and he pays a fixed fee to the owner of the land, he has to take off the full amount of meiser. He's just paying, let's say he's renting the field for $200 a year. So that doesn't take away at all from the amount that he has to take meiser. Then he gets to keep everything from the field, even if he gives him part of the crop, and that's what he uses to pay up the fixed fee. But the fixed fee is separate from the use of the land, and he's the one who's using the land. He keeps all the crops, and he has to pay the meiser. So we're saying this makabel is also going to be treated. This when he makes a kabbalanus with the guy, it's also going to be treated as if the full land belongs to the yid, the guy, but that he should separate meiser before. Since when it comes to whether he did work or not, he still has to separate the meiser, and he still has to pay the guy, because what he has to pay to the guy, whenever someone is a chayref, whenever someone is not a percentage paying aris, but rather a fee paying aris, where he pays a fixed fee. So what he has to pay is just a chayv that he has to pay, but it doesn't affect what is available to separate Chumas and Maisus. He's also treated as a pereya chayvoi, and the Lagabi for this reason, like since the whole chiyuv of separating meiser over here, because we say that the guy doesn't really own the field, and there's a deraisa din of separating meiser, so we're going to treat the makabel, a kabbalan, a oris kabbalan, who's paying a percentage as if he was an oris paying a fixed fee, who always would always have to separate meiser himself. So that's the explanation of this Mishnah. Amalei Rav Kahana Rav Papi, Amilol Rav Zvit, El Hadatanya Behuda Oimem Makabel Sadei Avoisav Mimatzik Nachri. Someone who a similar case but slightly different. Someone, instead of saying that it's talking about stay avoisav, it's someone who's paying as a makabel, an oris who pays a percentage. He from a guy who stole a field, who basically confiscated a field from a yid. He has to ma'asav and noiselna. He has to separate meiser and he gives it to him. So for the Gemara, my irya matzik. Why does it have to say a case where the guy stole it? So really, it doesn't belong to the guy. Forgetting about the fact that a guy can't have a kinyan in Eretz Yisrael. This is a guy who really there's no gzelis on karkais. There's no gnev on karkais. So the gnev is invalid altogether. So what do we have to say that it was a guy that stole it? Even without the fact that it was stolen, we had said in the first Mishnah that when a guy has, even if he got it legitimately a field, you have to separate the meiser before paying the kabbalanus. So why are we saying over here that the guy stole it? This is a raya yesh kinyan lach in Eretz Yisrael. Really, a guy does have a kinyan in Eretz Yisrael, so therefore there's no chiyuv deraisa to separate meiser. Lafkia miyad meiser, and therefore there is no chiyuv meiser. And the makabel is not treated as if he's paying a fee. So this percentage really belongs to the guy. Umay stay avoisav mamish. It's talking about, but stay avoisav in our Mishnah is saying a different thing. It's saying that if it belonged to his father, it means his forefather, his ancestors. The Chachamu Mesakin that he has to separate ma'aser. Uludehu the Kansura Abanan. But the Chacham only made a knas on him that he has to separate ma'aser, even though the truth is that the guy was kinder and therefore there is no chiyuv ma'aser altogether on this field, and he's not treated. He's not considered like a chayacha, but rather it's a percentage going to the guy. So therefore, for that reason, also you shouldn't have to separate ma'aser, because on the guy's percentage, certainly what goes to the guy, there's no chiyuv ma'aser. But however, since this is something, a field that belonged to his ancestors, kansura abanan da'ide chaviva le'atfei, since he has an attachment to this is his ancestors' field, but azal le'kabbalah, he's going to still go and enter in this kabbalahs.
Why? But it was stolen from him. Why are we giving him a knas? What did he do wrong?
Well, that's going to be the Gemara's next question. In a second, the Gemara is going to ask that.
Oh.
But a regular person who's not going to be attached to the field, if you're going to make a rule that he has to pay meiser, he's just going to opt out of the whole thing. This guy will go and do makabel anyway, but the other person won't. You're explaining why you're only willing to do this knas to him, because then he'll still be makabel the field, but another person won't. But why? What is the reason for this knas? Rav Yochanan says the reason we are constant is to make it more difficult for him to keep as a aris, and therefore he'll go and make the leap and he'll make it muchzik. Rashi says, and bara means to be machzik in the field. He's going to go and buy it from the guy. And in other words, it's an incentive for him that he should get back the field, get back ownership of the field, and not just remain a makabel. Rav Yirmiyah says, for this you have to really understand the reason, right? If you don't understand the reason, you'd be wondering, if you didn't know this fact, that we're talking about someone who were trying to convince him to buy the field, you wouldn't understand. For example, we said before that it's going to be different than Eretz Yisrael, that we're trying to get him to acquire his family's Yerusha.
What's the underlying mitzvah? This Yishacharet?
I think so. Yeah, I think that we want people to not leave lands in the rishus of Goyim in Eretz Yisrael. I think that's what it is.
A little bit of a tziyonish shtickle.
I'm sorry.
It's a little bit of a tziyonish shtickle.
Listen, the Yishuv Eretz Yisrael before the Tziyah, it existed before the Tziyah existed.
Right.
No one was a bigger Tziyah than the Chavetz Chaim. You know, he used to leave his suitcase packed for the day that he's going to get to go back, and he opened the whole kail to learn kachim to prepare for it. Itmar, another top. Someone who decided, I'm going to help out. I see my friend has an orchard, and it's lying fallow. So he went down. They have an auto shaloi b'rishus, and he went and planted trees. He was a Johnny Appleseed. He went planting trees in his rishus, in his land without his rishus. Amarav, shaman loy. We evaluate. We're going to see what we evaluate. And we evaluate. We make two estimations. We estimate how much expense this Johnny Appleseed went to by planting these trees, and we also evaluate how much benefit accrued to the owner of the orchard from the trees that he planted, and whichever is less, that's what gets paid to this menadiv. This guy decided to plant trees. He's yad al tachtain. He's going to get paid the less of his expenses or of what he benefited. That means even if he spent $1 million, if all that it helped the other guy was $100, the guy, the owner of the land, only has to pay him 100 because I never asked you to do it. Shmuel says, no, he says no. You treat it as if he was a special agronomist who has the ability to plant trees. You say, how much do you usually pay? It's $50 an hour to hire someone. That's what you pay. There's no yad al tachtain. Amar papa v'loy pligi. There's no machlokes. They're really both saying the same thing. That which we say that it's yade al yoina, that he has to pay him the full amount of someone who does this kind of work. It's talking about a tree which is very similar to what we had legabi zen and chasa. That over here, since it's a orchard that this guy does intend to plant, and this guy went ahead and jumped the gun and planted it, he gets treated like he would anyone who did it. But if it's something that he wasn't intending to plant, and this guy decided to do it, then it's yad el tachtaina. He can't charge him for more than either the expenses or the benefit. Rav, was the one who said yad el tachtaina, meaning that where it's not a sada suyalita, he only gets paid the minimal amount. He doesn't say it directly, but we will figure it out. We can deduce that that's what Rava holds from a case. Someone came to Rav, and he said, I planted trees by, Reuben says, I planted trees by Shimon, and I want you to make a shuma to figure out how much to pay me, how much someone who does this kind of work gets paid. Amalei, loy bina. Shimon, who's the owner of the land, said, no, I don't want to pay you. I don't want your work. I wasn't intending to use this land. So they had gone to Rav. So Rav said, okay, listen, he didn't want it's sada she'ena asuya lintais. So therefore it should be treated yad al tachtaina. So here's where you see that he holds his halacha. Amalei loybina. But the owner of the land said, no, I didn't want it. Not just I didn't want it. I mean, I really didn't want it. Not just that I didn't care to have it done, but I actively preferred to leave it empty. I wanted to have a baseball game on the land. So Rav left it. He said, okay, if you really didn't want it, then this guy is hurting you, then you don't have to pay him at all. However, the Gadra become intala. In the end, he saw that the owner of the land, Shimon, not only did not make a baseball game on the field, he put up fencing to protect these trees that Johnny Appleseed had planted. Now that you're showing that you cared about it, the vice says you did really intend to. You're just being cheap, and you're making believe that you didn't want it in order not to pay him. Now you have to pay him not just Yad al Tachtoina, but Yad al Elyon. But in any case, we see that Rav holds that if he really doesn't want to use that field for planting, if the owner doesn't want to plant, it would be Yadai al Tachtoina. Itbar. Similar din. Someone whose house fell down. Ubana shaleber shusay. He said, I have nothing to do today. I'll build up the house and I'll go get paid from it. But Amalei, and then after he did this, he said, you know what? This is silly. Why did I build this guy a house? I want to go take back all the wood and stone that I used to build this guy's house. It was a mistake. I want my raw materials back. Rav Nachman says, okay, it's his. He's the one who put it there. He could take it back. But Sheshes Amar ain't Shaimalai. Sheshes says we don't allow him to do that. Meisvei, and yeah, we're going to see why ain't Shaiman or ain't Shaimalai. Meisvei, Rav Shimon Gamliel says that Beishamai says we listen to him. In this question, Lamer of Nachman Amar Beishamai. So Rav Nachman, who says that we allow him to take away the Eitzim Bavanim, that he's coming out like Beishamai. Why Rav Nachman passing like Beishamai, not like Sil? So Gemara, no. Hudam Tana, the Tanya. We have a brisa. Shaiman Loi Divrei Reb Shimon Lazar. Reb Shimon Lazar says both according to Reb Lazar, both according to Beis Hillel and Beishamai, he can go take back his Eitzim Bavanim. Reb Shimon Gamliel and Beishamai are Shaiman Loi Beis Hillel and Shaiman. The Reb Shimon Gamliel, it's a machlekes Reb Shimon Gamliel and Reb Shimon Lazar whether Reb Beishamai and Beis Hillel will chayla. So Rav Nachman was saying like Rav Shimon Elazar that even Beis Hillel agrees Shaiman. My hobby Allah. What's taka the din on this? Can the person go take the Eitzim Bavanim? Rav Yaakov and Rav Yochanan Beis the bay is Shaiman, the sada ain't Shaiman. On a house he could taka take back what he put in, but someone who puts trees in, like the first case that we talked about, where he did it without his rishus, and now he wants to go take the trees away, ain't Shaiman. You don't list him. Sada my time, Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. By a Sada, the reason is because we want to be Miyashav Eretz Yisrael. We don't want something is planted. We want to encourage people to keep it there, so we don't allow him to uproot it. I have a hard time understanding this. What kind of trees are these? If it's fruit trees, it's anyway also to uproot it. I think it's a lav, right? You're not allowed to uproot a fruit tree. So maybe it's talking about some other kind of tree, a firewood tree. Another man the Amma says, another reason is different. It's because of that it deteriorates the land. When you plant a tree, it uses up nutrients, and now you're going to take it away. You're going to leave him without the trees that used up the nutrients, and he's going to have a shvacha fallow field that he won't be able to plant on. The difference will be if it's in Chutz La'aretz, the second reason will apply, the first reason won't. Still never gets back to the question of what the machlekes is by a bias. I imagine it's also the same thing, a version of Yishuv Eretz Yisrael. We don't want to encourage people to knock down houses. Zok the mission. This is a very. I did work for a short amount of time in commercial evictions. Trying to evict people who stop paying their rent. And if anyone who has ever been exposed to this area, very difficult to evict people from a tenant in New York City or New York State altogether. They don't pay. So this is the Gemara that talks about this topic. Someone who rents a house to his friend, during the winter months, he can't kick him out from, and what does that mean? From Sukkot until Pesach. During the summer, he has to give him 30 days notice. The Gemara is going to have different pshatim in what it means that you can't evict him. But we'll see. We'll see in the end. It's going to be a question of notice, but we'll see what the Gemara is hava means. And in the cities, In a city, if you have an apartment in a city, you need 12 months. B'chanuyas, echad ayaris, v'echad krachim, and if someone has a store, a commercial enterprise, also there's a longer period. It always needs 12 months. A store for bakers or dyers, you give 3 years. Now the reason why, as we're going to see, this is all talking about notice. So first of all, we say that before we get to the first din of the Mishnah, the last part, which the Gemara doesn't really explain at length, in Krachim, it's generally harder to find places. People stick there more, so you need a longer notice in order to be able to find something, a new place to live. And a store, the Gemara is going to explain that people often have credit that they've extended, and the people who owe the money, if they come back and the store's not there, they'll just go home and they'll never pay it. So there's a big expense to them, and they have to be misader all their accounts before they leave. And these bakers and dyers extend credit even longer than other people, so therefore they need a longer period of time. Let's get back to the Ikadin. Gemara. Why is it that in the Yemaisak Sham we say it has to be the entire period? The Gemara's Havamina is because that's the standard. When someone rents during the winter months, it's harder to move during the winter months. So normally when you rent, it's for the entire winter. So you can't end the rental in the middle of the winter. If someone rents his house during the winter also, he's gonna rent it for that amount of time. That's what his intention is. So why should they be different? The reason is because it's not typical to find something in the winter. So if you're going to make him leave in the middle of the winter, he's not going to find something else. So that's Gemara's understanding, is that you can't evict someone during the winter. Ema Seifa, the Kracham Echad Yemaisak Sham, Shnei Masar Chodesh. If you're in one of the town, in one of the cities, you always have to wait 12 months, whether it's Yemaisak Chama, Yemaisak Shamam, but if the 12 months ends up in the middle of the summer, then he can evict him. If the whole din is that you can't evict someone during the winter because he's not going to find anything, so how can we say that if a person has rented something for 12 months, at the end of the 12 months, even if it's in the middle of the winter, you can evict him, but he's still going to be stuck the same way, no matter how long, when he started. Amar of Yudah, so Yudah says, no, we're not talking about when you can evict him, we're talking about what the notice is. So someone who rents and he wants to evict someone during the Yemai Sachama, he has to give him 30 days notice, and that gives him 30 days to find someplace else to go, and that's sufficient. But Yemai Sachshamim, it's difficult to find places. No, people are generally not moving then. So therefore you have to be Maidiya him 30 days before the Yemai Sachshamim start. And then if it's only 15 days, then it's too late. Once he doesn't have full 30 days before the Yemaisak Shamim to find, then he has to wait till after Pesach before he can evict him. And the Gemara explains this. Hamaska bais chaver stam. Ein yachal yitzia b'Yemaisak Shamim. Nichag v'ara Pesach. Someone who rented stam, he can't be maitzim from Chag until Pesach. Elam kenediyah shloshim yom meikara, unless he gave him 30 days warning in advance of the Yemaisak Sham. Tanya nami hachi k'sha'amu shloshim k'sha'amu shnei masar chodesh le'avu el haidiyah. It's only talking about that you have to give haidah, you have to give notice 30 days before. Which, if anyone's involved in the eviction process, is exactly the way it works now. It happens to be exactly. It's still 30 days. Generally, you give 30 days notice. And you have to start the clock ticking. I mean, we don't have the Yemaisak Shamim, but we still have the notice. The notice required. If anyone wants to evict someone, that's the first thing you do is you give notice. The Gemara says, and this it goes both ways. just like the owner, the landlord has to give the tenant 30 days notice, so too the tenant has to give 30 days notice to the owner, to the landlord. And if he doesn't, he has to pay the rent, he has to stay in. The Amalei, because the landlord will tell me, you would have given me a notice, I would have found someone else to replace you. If it's even one day into the winter months, he can't be Motzei him. In fact, we said he has to give him notice 30 days, and now we're saying if it's on the first day of the winter, then you can't evict him. But we said you have to give, it's not one day, it's 30 days before. If one of the 30 days intrudes into the winter months, then he doesn't have the ability to be Motzei until Pesach. And if the landlord, rather than evicting him, says, I'm going to double your rent, that he could do so. Amalei Rav Nachman, this is a earthy pity comment. Are you going to grab him in a sensitive spot and take off his cloak? Meaning you've got him, you've got leverage over him. You got him by a sensitive place that you're twisting the. What's the difference between evicting him and saying I'm going to double your rent? In either way, you're forcing him out. So we're talking about where the market has gone up and he's just doing it at the market rate. So then he can raise the rent, even though it's the middle of the winter, and the guy can't say I'm. You can't raise it because you can't kick me out. You can raise it, you just can't kick him out. Pshita, Nafal base. If a landlord's house fell down, the guy lives in a house and he also has a separate rental. If the landlord's own house fell down, he can kick out the tenant and say you're not any better than me. Why should you continue to live in my rental? And I'm without a house. I'm homeless. I'm going to kick you out, and I'm going to live in my own house. However, if the landlord sold his house, or he gave it birusha to his children, or he gave it as a matana, then the tenant can say to the new owner, "You're not any better than the person who rented it to me, and you can't evict me." So the selling it does not enforce. That does not mean that the new owner can immediately evict it. The brave. If someone married off his son and now his son needs a place to live, chazina, we have to check. If the owner, the landlord, he knew that the chasna was coming up, he had it was the middle of the winter months, and he knew the chasna was 3 months away, and then a week before the chasna, he pops up and he tells the tenant, "You got to get out because I need it for my son." If he had an opportunity to give him 30 days notice, he should have done so. Then he can't kick him out. But if not, if it came up suddenly, his son was a shotgun wedding. His son informed him, "I'm getting married in Vegas tomorrow," and now he doesn't have a place for his son to live. Then he could kick out the tenant. Who gavra the zaman arba de chamra? I happened to say over this case. I was learning it, and I thought the women would appreciate this case. This is interesting. There was a fellow who bought a ship full of wine. He couldn't find any warehouse place to store it. He said to this woman, he asked her, "Do you have any place? I know you have a warehouse space. Can I store my wine by you? I'm willing to pay." She said, "No, I'm not willing to rent to you." Azal Kitcha. So he bought her flowers and a box of chocolates, and he convinced her, and he was Makadish her. She accepted Kedushin. And she gave, because it's her husband. This guy he did Kedushin. He didn't do Nesum, but he did Kedushin. It's our betrothed. She said, "Of course, now I have room in my warehouses." So he put in his wine. As soon as his wine was in the warehouse, Azal Abesa, he went to his house, Kasab Lagita, he wrote a get, Shadala, and he gave it to her. He divorced her on the spot as soon as he got his wine into the warehouse. Very mercenary guy. Azla Ihi Agro shakuloi mineu bay. She went and she hired schleppers. The and she used the money. She sold some of the wine to pay for these schleppers. Afikta vosve b'shvila. She took out his wine and left it at the side of the road. Amr of Huna Braid of Yeshua. Kasher also came also like just like he did. He wanted to be tough. He thought he was going to get away with something. That's what happened to him. Yasha, yeah, Gmula Yasha Baroisha. What he did got paid back to him. And the truth is, this is not just if it was the Chatzah de Kaimel Agra. Even if it was a warehouse that she was really looking for someone to rent it to. On she could say, everyone I'm willing to rent to. You I'm not willing to rent to. You're like a crouching lion. You are out to get me. You are someone I don't want to do business with. And even though normally a person could go, let's say under normal circumstances, someone has a warehouse that's kaimel agrant, and the person puts his wine in it, the person can't just evict it and say I'm not interested. But in this case, she has a legitimate reason for not wanting to engage with this guy, her former fiance, who just took advantage of her. Very quite a Lothario, this guy. We said in the Mishnah that certain types of a baker and a dyer, they get 3 years notice. They extend credit for a long time, and therefore they need a lot of notice in order to fix all their accounts before they move out. Zok the Mishnah. Someone who rents a bias to his friend. The renter has certain responsibilities that he has to take care of. He has to provide a door. He has to provide the bolt on the outside of the door, and he has to provide the minol, the lock. I'm sorry, the nagar is the bolt on the inside. So when he's inside, he can secure it. Or no, and the lock on the outside when he leaves. Anything that requires a craftsman to do. And anything that can be done by an ordinary laborer, that's the responsibility of the renter. The garbage that's produced. We'll see exactly what zevel we're talking about, but they used to want to gather what an animal would produce on the ground. They wanted to use it for fertilizer, so that belongs to the owner. And all the renter gets, he gets the ash from the different types of ovens that he could use for his purposes. He has to provide him doors, he has to provide windows, he has to strengthen the ceiling, he has to strengthen the beams of the house. Those are all things that are, I guess, Maisa Omen. And these are the basics that you need in order to rent a house. He has to provide a roof if you have to get up to the roof he has to provide a ladder if you have to get up to the roof to fix it. Lastly, Micah, he has to put the fence so that people shouldn't fall off the porch. Lastly, Marzav, he has to provide the boards that they use to redirect the water away from the walls of the house. And to plaster the roof. Mezuzah al mi. Who has the responsibility of putting up a mezuzah? Practically more mezuzah. Amar of Shashi. Mezuzah chayvas adari. Mezuzah is the chayva. Whoever, when you rent a house, the renter has to provide it. Whoever's living there has to provide a mezuzah. Elamokam mezuzah al mi. Who has to provide the place to hang a mezuzah? We used to have stone houses, and on stone there was no way to attach a mezuzah. So you had to first put up something to attach it to. So who has that responsibility? Anything that's not a Maisa Omen, it's the responsibility of the renter. Who? It's also not a Maisa Omen. Why not? All he needs to do is put it into like a reed and hang it from the door. So it's not a Maisa Omen, therefore it does fall on the side. someone who rents a house to his friend, the renter has to provide the mezuzah. And this is very negela ma'ase. It comes up all the time. Ukashu yoitza, when the renter leaves, lo yitlana biyadai. He can't take the mezuzah with him. I guess we're talking about a house that was first built. Otherwise, the previous renter would have had to leave it there, or certainly the owner if he left it. But if it was newly built and the seicher paid to put in the mezuzah, because that's his responsibility, when he leaves, he can't take it. He can't take it with him when he leaves. But if it's a guy, then he can take it for the obvious reason that you don't want to leave it because then it's going to be it's going to get ruined. The guy's going to throw it in the garbage. There was one person who took the mezuzah with him when he left. The cover ishtay, ushnei banav, and his wife and his two children he buried them because of the bad luck that he got from taking away his mezuzahs, from the punishment. We just said that you are supposed to take away my guy, and then we say there was one guy who took it off, and then his whole family died. It's going on the first case of where he rented from a yid, and the new renters were ostensibly going to be yidden as well. We said that the fertilizer that's produced in a rented property belongs to the owner, and all that the renter gets is what comes from the ovens, the ash from the ovens. But my asking, if we're talking about where the chutzner, the courtyard in front of the house, was rented to the renter, and these are the oxen that are producing this fertilizer, the waste that becomes fertilizer, it belongs to him. Why would it belong to the owner? We're talking about the chutzner was not rented to the seicher, and the animals belong to the renter. Shita, then it's obvious that it belongs to the masker. Of course, if it still belongs to him, why should the seicher have any rights to the fertilizer, the waste that's produced in the chutzner that he hasn't rented from animals that are not his? It's the chutzner belongs to the owner. He didn't rent it out. And we're talking about where animals would wander in and produce waste. And therefore, we say that since it's his chutzner, he's kainet the owner of the chutzner. Since he retains the ownership of the chutzner, his chutzner is kainet the waste before the masker can grab it. And the reason why the owner gets to keep the waste is because even though he's not aware that the animal is producing the waste in his chutzner, since his chutzner is still kainet even without his knowledge, and therefore the renter doesn't have the ability to grab it before the owner becomes aware of it. If an owner of a property says, any Metzias that come into my property today, tiknali chatzeri, I want my chutzner to be kind of, it doesn't work. Why can the person say any Metzias should be nikna as soon as it comes in? Over there, that which we say that it's not kind, it's a chutzner she'enim mishtameres, but over here it's a chutzner mishtameres, and therefore he could be kind of the waste. We said over there in that same case, but if people heard that there was a Metzia in a person's land, then he said that I want to be kaina, my land to be kaina, it's kain. What does it help him to say that people know that there's a Metzia there? If it's ain't mishtameres, we said a chutzner cannot be kain with it unless it's mishtameres. It's like, well, no, keeping the Yatzal Shem Metzia here, Mavdil Badili Inshimini, Vahavlik Chatzim Shtameres. Since people know that there was, let's say, they give the example of a tzvi with a broken leg was on his property, so everyone knows that he got lucky and he got this deer on his property. So everyone will not touch it because they know that it belongs to him, and therefore it's as if it was watched. Meisvei. Zevel that comes out of we said that he gets to keep the ash that comes from the ovens. You know what? we'll leave this for tomorrow. I think everyone is a long yom tov. Thank you for your patience. Let's stop here. Well.